A new poll by Angus Reid shows that fully 61% of Canadians support reinstating the death penalty, a number that grows even higher in the Atlantic provinces, Alberta and British Columbia. The poll is new, but the sentiment isn't. In the history of polling on the subject, there has never been a poll showing anything different. Last year, for example, our Sun News pollster, Abacus Research, found that 66% of Canadians support the death penalty. What's interesting in the numbers is that the return of the death penalty isn't just a right-wing thing. I mean, remember, Harper only got 40% in last spring's election, so a lot of non-conservatives support the death penalty too. In fact, in the Abacus poll I mentioned, NDP members were just about as likely to support the death penalty as conservative supporters were. So why isn't it the law of Canada? I mean, the Prime Minister himself says he supports capital punishment. Watch this.
Capital punishment.
I don't see the country wanting to do that.
You don't sound as firm as.
Well, I'm not. I personally think there are times where capital punishment is appropriate, but I've also committed that I'm not. In the next Parliament, I have no plans to bring that issue forward.
Well, look, if the Prime Minister believes in it, and if most Canadians do too, and if this is a tough on-crime government, why don't we have the law in place? I mean, what's with the I believe in the death penalty but won't do anything about it? Is it that the Conservatives don't want to wade into moral issues? Well, the entire criminal code is a moral issue. That's what distinguishes a crime from, say, an accident. I mean, a traffic accident is morally neutral. At least it's no more than an act of carelessness or negligence. But the criminal law is about punishing not just physical deeds, but what lawyers call mens rea, the guilty mind. The entire criminal code, by definition, deals with moral issues. Now, of course, the polls I've quoted from reputable pollsters like Angus Reid and our own David Coletto of Abacus ask straight-up neutral questions. But I bet if Canadians had been reminded of the most heinous crimes when they were being polled, those numbers would have been even higher. I mean, seriously, don't you think that statistic would be a lot higher if you reminded people of Paul Bernardo, the sadistic murderer, just before you asked them about death penalty? Or even worse, the Shafia murderers who killed 4 members of their own family for the honor crime of their daughters and one of their wives wanting to be Canadian girls instead of girls living in medieval Arabia. I bet the support for the death penalty would have been closer to 80 or even 90% if you would have reminded people about Bernardo and the Shafias. Now, I've got my own reservations about the death penalty. I think that anyone who has a respect for human life, who is even pro-life, ought to be reluctant to snuff out a life, even the life of a sadistic murderer like the Shafias. But put aside the risk of a false conviction. The bigger question is, should we kill someone, even an evil person? Should we, as a society, calmly and coolly set in motion a process to take a life, even of a horrid murderer like Paul Bernardo? Even those who should say yes to that should say so with a degree of discomfort. There should be no jubilant death penalty supporters. But here's the thing. I believe that one of the big reasons why so many people do want the death penalty is because of the general laxity in Canadian justice. We all know about the lenience of the parole board, about statutory release where prisoners are, by law, let out before their sentence is served as a default. Of discounts for time served pending trial, where criminals get double credit for time being held in remand. Of absurd concurrent sentences, kill 2 people, serve both sentences at the same time. Of conditional sentences where you don't actually have to serve any time in jail if you meet some conditions like checking in with a social worker once a week. And even first-degree murder, what the Shafias were convicted of, what Bernardo was convicted of, that comes with a so-called life sentence. Well, it's not really a life sentence at all. It means 25 years in jail. So Hamid Shafia, who killed his 3 sisters and his stepmother, well, he's 21, so he could be out prowling the streets again by age 46. I mean, life expectancy in Canada is close to 80. So serving a 25-year term isn't even a third of a real life sentence. And remember, he killed 4 people. I think that's part of what's driving the demand for capital punishment, that there are some crimes so heinous that the bulk of Canadians know that justice just isn't being served, that even the so-called maximum punishment that the courts will mete out will be insufficient. We're sick of repeat offenders. We're sick of revolving door justice. We're sick of parole boards. And so when a serious, heinous, national-level crime like Bernardo or Shafia grabs our attention, we know that the slack liberal justice system won't do. So we want something more. I put it to you that if we tighten up our justice system, if we had truth in sentencing, if we had life sentences that meant life, And if we took the luxuries out of jail, the big screen TVs, the golf courses, the free university programs, I truly believe that most of those calling for the death penalty would be satisfied with true life sentences instead, because we could trust the justice system. But that's normal people with that view, folks who vote conservative or even blue-collar folks voting NDP. Let's call them severely normal Canadians. Let's even use the phrase working class, blue-collar, folks who live in normal communities, place where crime sometimes happens. Compare those people to the snobby class, the fancy people, the people who know better, the liberal media elites. You know, the ones who typically live in the fancier neighborhoods, the gated communities, the places where street crime is rare and where police answer 911 calls a lot faster. The snobby class is typically immune from real crime, so they think those who are concerned about it are just fearmongers or bigoted. It reminds me of Rosie O'Donnell. You know who I'm talking about, the left-wing Hollywood activist? Here's a clip of Rosie appearing at a big anti-gun rally a few years back called the Million Mom March. Look at this.
We have had enough. Enough of the NRA and their tactics.
The NRA, that's the National Rifle Association, the gun rights lobby in the States. She really hates guns, doesn't she? She spoke at an anti-gun rally. Except for that she travels with a bodyguard who packs a gun. He's got a permit to carry a handgun. Got that? So no guns for poor people, no guns for average people, people who live in dangerous neighborhoods, for shopkeepers who've been robbed week after week. No guns for minorities in rough neighborhoods where cops take a half hour to answer a call if they come at all. No guns for regular people. But for fancy people, snobby people, Hollywood people, sure, make an exception. They can have armed bodyguards. That's the thing about crime. The fancy people in the press don't like tough justice, but normal people who are afraid of crime aren't allowed to get justice. It's a difference between the fancy class and real people, but here's the problem. Here's the reason why we don't have crime laws that we want, that even the Prime Minister himself wants. Here's a clip of the fancy people who help shape opinion in this country. Look at this national freakout when a Conservative senator suggested that convicted murderers might be offered a rope with which to hang themselves. Look at this.
A Conservative senator is backing away slightly from some controversial comments he made involving capital punishment.
Conservative Senator Pierre-Hugues Boisvenu.
A Tory senator had to do a little backtracking also. He was forced to make a fast apology after saying convicted murderers should be given rope to hang themselves.
Suddenly today, the death penalty was a main topic of debate.
A Conservative senator's comments about the death penalty are making a lot of waves in Ottawa this hour.
With controversial comments made by a Conservative senator.
A Conservative senator stunned even his own party.
Let me sum up the official media view here. Convicted murderers should not be encouraged to kill themselves, but assisted suicide is a human right, but Jack Kevorkian is a hero, and Henry Morgentaler deserves the Order of Canada. Okay, I got it. Look, I'm not a lusty advocate for capital punishment. I think there's nothing more somber than that, but sometimes there are criminals so heinous it is a fitting punishment. Here's an example. When Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi chiefly responsible for organizing the Holocaust, was finally caught and put on trial in Israel, he was sentenced to be hanged, the only person ever to be executed by a civilian court in Israel. But Israel knew that a genocidal mass murderer of the depravity of Eichmann needed a superlative moral punishment, and that a jail cell simply wouldn't do. Same thing with Paul Bernardo. Same thing with the Shafias. Same thing for the unrepentant murderer and terrorist Omar Khadr. I don't want capital punishment to become routine, as it is in, OPEC countries like Saudi Arabia. But I do want it to be safe, legal, and rare. Sort of like another state-sanctioned taking of life.